Bill Maher seems to be getting a little agitated. Looking at a 5-year period as to how many children under the age of 17 to 8 received gender-affirming medical treatment, medicinal. Something like a little bit less than 1,000 got
926 adolescents with gender-related diagnosis received puberty blockers from 2018 through 2022. So that's a 4-year period. And during that time,
5-year actually.
Oh, sorry, 5-year.
Yep, it was a 5-year period.
Math is bad. During that time, 1,927 received hormones. So a far cry from the millions and millions of children who are infected by this woke ideology that we're hearing from the right. I mean, less than 2,000 received hormones over that 5-year period, and less than 1,000 adolescents received puberty blockers during that period. And we should say, like, puberty blockers are used outside of gender-affirming care all the time. If there's a child who has puberty that's starting a little bit too early, their pediatrician will likely recommend puberty blockers for that treatment. And you see how in these states they're targeting gender-affirming care. Florida comes to mind. They leave that carve-out for kids that need that puberty blocker, which just temporarily stalls it.
The doctor decides that it's going to be necessary for some other...
But not for this instance. Right. Not for this instance, because it's about bigotry.
Here is Bill Maher and John Cryer discussing gender-affirming care for minors. And here's Bill Maher convincing himself. And, you know, we hear this a lot. Like, whenever we talk about this issue, there is... the claim that we do this because we're being bullied into doing it or because we want to fit in. I can assure you, dollar for dollar, audience size, I mean, however you want to calculate this, we don't get some type of premium for basically saying that doctors and parents and children should be in charge of their medical care, not bigots passing laws in states. But here's Bill Maher with the same sort of like trope.
There was a lot of people saying that kids who were going through gender dysphoria were not getting enough care before they were making lifelong decisions, and that's a concern, absolutely. But the report said that they were actually getting enough care, but they as a society were using it as a way to say we don't want this to even be a possibility for people under 18. And so at any rate.
Right, and that's too far. And like, it's a shame that we can't ever just meet in the middle of what's common sense. Like Trump, I see they're not letting somebody use the bathroom there.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, it's just, again, can we just not do stupid on either side?
But what I'm saying is that parents who have kids who are going through severe gender dysphoria have very limited options to begin with, and they are usually trying to think about the survival of their child, and so limiting what they have access to, and when there actually is an enormous amount of statistical evidence that supported the Dutch protocols, I think it's wrong to limit for government to limit what they feel is the appropriate medical treatment.
I just want people to contemplate the idea of like meeting in the middle on any other type of like medical condition. Mm-hmm. Like, do we have to like, look, I get it, chemo or radiation for cancer, but why don't we do half? Yeah. Why don't we do half doses? Can we just agree on that?
Right.
Or like, appendix. Do we have to take the whole thing out?
Yeah.
Do we have to take the whole appendix out? Like everybody's going around. Like, I mean, this is just so absurd.
You need a C-section. Should we only do a little incision and then rip the baby out this way?
This is also perfect evidence that these people who supposedly are concerned about children, supposedly concerned about this being a social contagion, for them, this is just a cultural issue. This is not an issue of health. This is not an issue of people's well-being. This is just a cultural issue. Like, I don't feel comfortable with this. Look, how about this? Can't we do, like, if you speak Spanish, press number 2 and let's just call it a day? Like, that's not what this is about here, folks. This is not like, this is upsetting my sense of gender and ickiness or whatever it is that, is up their ass about it. And just the idea that you're talking about splitting the difference indicates that he has a fundamental misunderstanding, or, maybe a perfect understanding of like actually what this issue is, that it's a cultural issue that he is fighting. There's nobody out there like forcing people to become trans. Go ahead.
Or government to limit what they feel is the appropriate medical treatment.
There are cases where it is appropriate, I think.
Okay,
I think this is the standard liberal position. And then there's like the people who won't admit that some of this is social contagion.
Oh.
Some of this is just a TikTok trend that got out of hand.
I don't agree.
Yeah. And that's okay. And that's what friends are for.
Okay.
To be able to come to it and go, okay, we've elucidated our points enough. People get where we're coming from, and they just, they'll trust me. In this town, everybody, you'll be the big champion. You own Bill Maher because they just want to agree with you.
Sorry,
and my
can you
take
pause it
on
for a
this,
sec? Off the top of my head, Sam or Bradley, do you know how many people are in our Discord?
12,000?
12,000. That's a lot bigger than the numbers that we just laid out. Is the majority report a social contagion? Because we're a lot more contagious than apparently the number of children receiving gender-affirming care. 926 adolescents from 2018 to 2022. Again, this is using insurance, so perhaps this could be a social contagion just for children whose parents can afford to go outside of insurance for all of this care. 1,927 receiving hormones. This is the trend. He is really got to be on the deep corners of the internet, Bill Maher, studying these different trends for him to attribute less than 2,000 kids, 3,000 kids total over this period as a trend.
My favorite idea from this, I should say a reaction to this, is those doctors who are on TikTok getting influenced by TikTok, and have decided that they're going to, and the idea that that these doctors are in it for the money. They went to medical school and undergraduate and spent 10, 12 years of school and interning and all the money associated with that. And then just the TikTok wave hit, and they immediately that's why they were at the right place at the right time. I took a good risk that when I entered into medical school that there would be a TikTok revolution and a social contagion. Right,
they swiped the wrong way, and then it was just one of those hypnosis spirals. Trans contagion.
And this part about Bill Maher, go back a little bit too, because this part about him saying now all your Hollywood friends are you're going to be cheered and this and that. The personal aggrievement.
I know.
This is all it's amazing how much of this just sort of is what drives this entire ideology.
And that's what friends are for.
Okay.
To be able to come to it and go, okay, we've elucidated our points enough. People get where we're coming from, and they just, they'll trust me. In this town, everybody, you'll be the big champion. You own Bill Maher because they just want to agree with you. And my take on this, just as super friend to friend now, is just the people in this town, they just want to be warriors, social justice warriors. So they're just always looking for a cause. And it's so much more often about them than the cause itself. Not that they're not sincere about stuff, but like what bugs Dave Chappelle so much about the trans thing, I think it's the fact that they want to make it the social justice issue of their generation. And it just doesn't compare to other ones. It's important. It's an issue. I think it's great we live in a time when trans people can be, respected and protected, but you're asking too much often to rewrite like the idea that when someone is born, there is a default setting for humans, male and female. Not everyone is. Now, a real conservative would say, no, everyone is. I would never say that.
But
I think
there are chromosomal spectrums.
There's a default setting,
hermaphroditism.
but then there's a whole other section, and that's great, and we should protect those people. But don't pretend there isn't also a default setting. And you can't rewrite the world so that every baby is just a jump ball. Oh, it could be anything. No, if it's got a dick, it's probably a boy. And if it's
Probably.
not, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that in a compassionate way.
Well, yeah.
But we'll also be apprised of the idea that children don't know shit about anything. Yes, sometimes it is obvious, and we should address it that way.
Pause it for a second.
But
First off, Bill Maher doesn't know shit about children. He doesn't,
Unless he has them on his podcast to tell them about Stormy Daniels and porn, which we played when you weren't around. It was pretty disturbing.
But the idea that, no, if you're born with a penis, you probably are going to identify as a man. And if you're born with a vagina, you probably are going to identify as a woman because we know the percentages of trans people. What he doesn't like, and he wants to say, like, people want this to be the civil rights cause of their time. I'm sure some people feel that way because for them it very well may be. Like where they're talking about their lives or their families' lives or their friends' lives, but the idea that for him it really is. I mean, you can hear this here. Like it is, you can do what you want in your own home, but if I got to walk down the street and see two guys holding their hands or making out. Like, why is this being shoved in my face? This is exactly what we heard. Shoved down my throat. This is what we heard 20 years ago, 30 years ago. This is what the homophobes would say. Mm-hmm. Like, you can do it, but the ones who are like, I'm splitting the difference here. Like, why do I get to see it? Why do they get to have the same, right of PDA, whatever it is, public, PDA as straight people? Like, that's what he's complaining about here. And, again, this is another one of those situations where it's like, you know what? If you're going to have a television show and you're going to have a platform where you're doing, you need to know the implications of your petty little cultural agreements. I mean, I don't, there may be music I don't like. There may be, trends in movies I don't like. There may be whatever it is. But if you play into that at a time where people are literally under threat for their very existence, you've got to own that. It's not a question of splitting the difference. It really is stunning.
It amazes me always, and it just never ceases to amaze me when people like these guys like him who can't place themselves outside of their current context, like when they historicize past civil rights fights, they always place themselves on the right side, right? Even when we know they wouldn't have been, because that's been in the past and history is over with now. So it's easy. It's obvious now in hindsight that these were horrible things. But at the time, there were so many people just like Bill Maher, even when you want to take the civil rights movement in the United States. Well, I agree that black people are not being treated poorly, but like, do they have to go so crazy like this? I mean, they're just causing so much chaos. That was the conversation that was being had, whether it's or Stonewall, gay rights, how gay Americans stood up to the fact that like the AIDS epidemic was running rampant throughout our society, and the governments weren't doing anything about it because it was a contagion for the godless heathens, gay men essentially. And like there were a lot of people that found that their protests really uncomfortable, and he sees those as settled issues, so there's no courage there, or like introspection or curiosity, because it's done and over with. And It's every time. It's every time with these conservatives. So, I mean, even on the issue of Israel-Palestine, we've seen how he's treated, talked about the protesters. He doesn't draw that comparison with South Africa at all.
Is there any more to this?
Yeah, we'll play a little bit more.
Okay.
About anything. Yes, sometimes it is obvious and we should address it that way. But I mean, kids, Christ almighty. I mean, the idea that I would, as a child, would have had to have dealt with something like this.
Well, again, the people that go through it don't say this is the life I want. No parent wants to be in the midst of those choices. It's
Some
terrifying.
kids these days actually just do want to be trans.
I
It's
don't
cooler,
agree.
John.
I don't
it's
agree.
a thing.
Nope. I don't agree.
Come on.
I don't agree with Bill Maher.
I know.
That's the name of the show tonight.
Well, your eyes are not open to that, I
Okay.
think.
Well, okay,
There are some kids,
yeah.
especially, why is it like so much more prevalent, like here than Indiana?
Well-
are they suppressing it there? Maybe a little.
Yeah, there's a societal
but
suppression, but it's like left-handedism.
There's probably a law in many of those states that you think is not showing it, and that law exists probably because of, we want to talk about social contagion and social pressure, but the idea that he has an issue with, and he's conflating the idea that like young people perceive their gender much more fluidly than people his age or even my age, because they can. And there's absolutely no harm in it. And the idea, again, that it is creating this sort of like tidal wave of people who are actually going into treatment. And by treatment, I mean, medical treatment, is just completely BS. But why would he care? Like the idea that, okay, he can pretend that John Cryer doesn't see, that John Cryer is blind to it.
John Cryer has 2 kids. Bill Maher doesn't have any kids.
Is the doctor blind to it? Are the multiple doctors? Are the parents blind to it? Everybody's been blinded by TikTok. And
Except
only Bill
Bill.
Maher has the ability to see through the TikTok haze. It's unbelievable.
I mean, really, so much of this crap is just like LA people who are resentful of their neighbors, and it's just and it's incredible how much
it birthed Breitbart. Just he resented it.
Lots of people are monetizing their resentment these days out there.
Folks,
There's like so much I would love to know about being a 21-year-old girl.
Nice, Bradley.
That's him talking to the Haktua girl.
Oh my
so
God.
much. He brought her on and was so creepy. I'm glad that you're on board with Bill Maher clips lately, because I feel like we've been playing them more on Thursdays, but he just really does epitomize that sanctimonious, like centrist archetype so well.
Folks, I'm afraid we have run out of time for phone calls. We took a couple. Davo Dunder. Some people have a strong sense of justice. Some are morally bankrupt, like Bill Maher. Bill Maher is a relic of an earlier aughts edgy liberal, aka centrist with right-wing tendencies. He definitely feels his fan base dwindling because most of them are over 70 and dying off. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.